Other developments to tell you today. Barack Obama has reportedly scrapped plans to pull all American troops out of Afghanistan before the end of his presidential term. That's according to a senior U.S. administration official. They say Washington will keep thousands of soldiers in the country. Meantime, the Taliban's gaining ground in Afghanistan and Islamic State's established a foothold there. So an official announcement expected later today. If it happens, it won't be the only U-turn in American policy in Afghanistan. Throughout the years, we've had a whole host of statements from Barack Obama.
We are going to end combat operations in Afghanistan at the end of 2014. We would consider a train and advise mission that would extend beyond 2014.
By the end of next year, our war in Afghanistan will be over. America's war in Afghanistan will come to a responsible end. And by the end of this year, the transition will be complete, and Afghans will take full responsibility for their security, and our combat mission will be over. I've decided that we will maintain our current posture of 9,800 troops through the end of this year.
Well, they're the various statements over the various years. Yeah, things change, but let's get some thoughts on this now from Chris Bambury, political analyst, joining us live. Things change, but was it a coordinated plan to start with? You have to debate the question. It's been going backwards and forwards here. American troops have been in Afghanistan since 2001. What have they brought to peace there in the peace process, looking back?
Well, there is no peace process in Afghanistan. We should remember that President Obama was first elected on a promise to withdraw American troops from Afghanistan. And with this announcement, American troops are likely to remain in Afghanistan when he's left the White House. So this represents a failure for the Obama administration. And we have a chaos represented by the ability of the Taliban to take the city of Kunduz, however temporarily, the disaster of the American bombing of the Médecins Sans Frontières hospital. And what it shows is that the Taliban's capacity to wage war in Afghanistan has not been reduced. And in fact, if anything, it is growing in terms of the geography of the Taliban presence. We have the Americans openly saying Islamic State are also building up a presence in Afghanistan. The government is unable to deal with this situation because it is divided. The election result is contested, as we know. And the army, despite massive efforts by the Americans and NATO to train it, is unable to fight. When the Americans first began pulling back from ground operations, they knew the Taliban had infiltrated the Afghani army and questioned its reliability. And all in all, this remains a failed state, the biggest producer of heroin in the world. It's the indictment.
Given everything you've said there and what President Obama is expected to say officially in the coming hours, the prospect of a full American withdrawal is nowhere on the horizon then, yeah?
No, it's not. I mean, he's talking about possibly reducing the number of troops to 5,500 by the end of next year. But we were told that all that was going to remain was the embassy guards and some trainers with the NATO forces. And the defeat at Kunduz, and that's what it is, even though the Taliban were eventually chased out of the city, has shown, I think, to Obama that the Americans still need to be there, that the Afghani army can't deal with this situation. So that is an indictment, as I said, of the huge efforts to try and build up and train the Afghani army, that it's unable to get a handle on the security situation inside the country. So the Americans are still going to be there. They're saying they're not going to be involved in ground operations, although I doubt that. They're called in whenever necessary. We have to add as well the huge number of mercenaries that are there from America and from the West. And I think it's likely we're going to see Western American troops involved in ground fighting, firefighting really, in an attempt to deal with Taliban incursions like that in Kunduz. And incidentally, more drone attacks, more helicopter attacks like that on the hospital in Kunduz, further civilian casualties, fueling support for the Taliban on the ground, because every civilian death from a drone strike or an airstrike brings up resentment of the American presence. All this is really, something of a recipe for a disaster. And the history is not going to prove very kind for President Obama in regards to his efforts in Afghanistan. Yeah, you talked about Kunduz there and this big surge forward in the Taliban there in the last week or so. The White House, of course, they went on to apologise for that deadly bombing of that hospital. Let's listen to that and come straight back.
President Obama spoke by telephone with Doctors Without Borders International President Dr. Joanne Liu to apologize and express his condolences for the MSF staff and patients who were killed and injured when a U.S. military airstrike mistakenly struck an MSF field hospital in Kunduz, Afghanistan. The president assured Dr. Liu that the Department of Defense investigation currently underway would provide a transparent, thorough, and objective accounting of the facts and circumstances of the incident, and that if necessary, the president would implement changes that would make tragedies like this one less likely to occur in the future.
Okay, a terrible mistake owned up to in warfare, but nonetheless, this news today that American troops are going to stay on is going to make them even less welcome by the locals, I guess.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that Obama has belatedly apologized for this attack, even though Médecins Sans Frontières were on the phone within seconds to the Americans saying that this attack had taken place. He doesn't phone up Afghani victims of American drone attacks and make that apology. So, you know, the attack in Kunduz on the hospital, yes, we'll feel resentment, but it's the daily sort of attacks, the killing of civilians, the accidental deaths caused by the drone strikes and the airstrikes, which are causing the real resentment on the ground. And as I say, there's no apology from Obama for that.